Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Red Bull explains that they believe Max Verstappen's key challenge next season will not come from his teammate Sergio Perez or from Ferrari or Charles Leclerc, but instead Lewis Hamilton from Mercedes. And also the comments on Perez are rather interesting, especially with regard to Riccardo now being their third driver. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Look at Valtteri Bottas, man. Look at this off-season look. This guy's absolutely out of control. There was also some like rap song that came out yesterday from this fella, Archangel & Co. that did a song called Bottas that has well over 1 million views in the first day that is literally about Valtteri Bottas. So, I mean, yeah, this guy's just absolutely built different. But let's talk about Red Bull, right? They dominated this season. Max Verstappen especially, 15 victories over the course of it. Truly remarkable stuff. One key point though, how much is this cost cap penalty going to hurt? The 10% reduction in testing time. I've said a couple of times before, I don't expect this to affect them at the start of next season. It's something that it's going to affect them over the next 12 months. But probably only will start to heed consequences at the end of next season or the middle of next season when they actually will have less testing time significantly than they would have had otherwise. The key point is though, if they get everything right and their engineers nail everything on, it doesn't make too much difference. There's enough wind tunnel testing time for them to get it right, but if they make mistakes with what they bring to the wind tunnel in their testing, then, you know, that's where it could potentially affect them. So some analysts have said it's going to hurt them a lot. Some reckon that they've kind of got off lightly here, so the debate is up in the air. But they're probably going to start out next season very strong, and you'd imagine that Max Verstappen will again be the favourite for the title. And of course, well, right now he's driving like the best driver in Formula 1. Mixed opinions though from the Red Bull camp on who their main competition is going to be. Christian Horner says here quite explicitly, Max is way above the rest in Formula 1. Now, you know, I do kind of want to bring this into a whole Perez discussion, just because next season, if the Mercedes especially is more competitive, then especially for the constructors and even for own teammates looking to get support of their other teammates, which might not always be the case at Red Bull, then you know, it raises questions the way things have been going at Red Bull over the past few weeks, especially now some of the comments actually coming out of the Red Bull camp themselves. Helmut Marko says the following though: Mercedes is a greater threat than Ferrari. Ferrari are strong, but Mercedes will be stronger as a whole, especially with a driver like Lewis Hamilton. Kind of funny really, because Helmut Marko, like he seems to flip-flop on this. Sometimes he's roasting Lewis and saying, you know, he's nowhere near as good as Max, and then sometimes he has statements like this where he's obviously praising Hamilton rather highly. And this was the article, there with some translations. This is basically one of the full quotes. So yeah, he's a top driver, especially Lewis Hamilton will be key for Mercedes fight back next season. And this is, well, part of the full quote. He is still a top driver, Hamilton. Ferrari also has a very good driver in Charles, but he makes mistakes. So, you know, as Marko says, I fear that Hamilton will not remain winless in 2023. Mercedes fought their way back to us over the season, and they have more wind tunnel time, which is key. Not just because of the penalty that Red Bull got for exceeding the cost cap, but just because of the way the rules work nowadays. The lower you finish in the constructors, the more testing time you get. Mercedes have approximately 27 or 28% more testing time than Red Bull over the next 12 months. And you'd think for an organisation as strong as Mercedes and as motivated as Mercedes, that could be enough to get back on level terms by the end of next season, if not before, who knows. So, I mean, yeah, of course, the other factor is though, Max Verstappen is driving at new levels, and as he says, I'm not worried, we're on good track for 2023, and with Max we have the best driver on the grid. So again, making it very clear that Max is their target guy. I mean, look, they don't say outright that Verstappen's their number one driver, but they don't really, you know, refuse to talk about it too much openly to the public. So what do you guys think? Are Ferrari going to be nowhere near to be seen? And this is the thing, Leclerc has come out and denied that they're in crisis, but you really look at the Ferrari situation, they've got no team principal. Who's going to be their technical guy? Like, it's an absolute mess in that camp right now. And yeah, maybe they fix it up, but it's going to take some time for them to get back on track, I would imagine. And it probably is going to compromise their season, especially because the strategy, other issues aren't really there for them. Mercedes have a stronger and deeper team than Ferrari do. And maybe, you know, Leclerc does make more mistakes than a Hamilton and maybe even a Russell, right? Who knows what happens for the upcoming season if it replicates what we saw this time around. So look, could we see another Verstappen versus Hamilton fight? I do think on their day, they are still the two best drivers on the grid. And on occasion, when we have seen some battles between them this season, they've been very entertaining. And 2021, of course, was absolutely just crazy and immense from start to finish. So Verstappen's looking back on that and said, you know, we had a great duel. And maybe it is a sign of things to come, let's say, going forwards, and probably something that needs to happen. Now, Christian Horner has a different opinion to Helmut Marko, saying that really no driver is even close to Verstappen's level, saying that there's only a couple of drivers, Hamilton and Leclerc, that are halfway to Verstappen's level. So, you know, look, it's quite the praise for Max, so don't get me wrong. wrong. Verstappen is the best driver on the grid right now, like just absolutely phenomenal performance this whole season, epitomized by a few races. Suzuka, I think especially, was an absolute masterclass. But yeah, to say that there's only two drivers, one of which is a 7-time world champion, that are even halfway to his level seems rather too ambitious from the Red Bull perspective. And also, you've got to consider strategy and teammates. We saw at the end of last season when Mercedes and Ferrari were finally getting competitive, you know, let's say a race, for example, like Mexico, where yeah, it was Max P1, but it was the two Mercedes were in great position as well to make the strategy work. Now, it turned out Mercedes didn't really have the pace that weekend and chose the wrong strategy with the medium to hard option. But, you know, still, if you've got Verstappen P1, Hamilton P2, Russell P3, and Perez is back in P4, P5, then from a strategic perspective, it becomes much more difficult for Max, even if he has the outright pace compared to all the other drivers on the grid. And that, I think, is one of the key issues about Perez. And this is why I feel like, you know, as Helmut Marko says, Hamilton will be the key threat next season. But also it comes down to their own team because, you know, they've outright dismissed any possibility of Perez winning the title, which is understandable. But, you know, Mercedes or even Ferrari aren't going to say, oh yeah, Sainz, there's no way he's going to win. Oh yeah, Russell, there's no way he's going to win. Like, you know, it's closer in terms of pure race pace at Mercedes anyway, but they don't really make statements like that. Whereas Marko says here, yeah, okay, Perez can win a race or two, as he did this season in Monaco and Singapore, but at the moment, I don't see him challenging Max over a whole season. In general, I don't think anyone at the moment can do that. So, you know, he's probably right. I mean, he is right, I think. I don't think Perez is a good driver, but he's not a Max Verstappen level driver. But at the same time, you know, I just think it's an interesting kind of way this is developing in that, is this the start of the Red Bull campaign to oust Sergio Perez and get someone else in? Just because, like, he's been a great servant for the team over the last few years, but especially in light of what happened at Brazil, I just wonder if there's any drama still lingering there, because, like, they've even been mentioning in quite explicit terms again about the issues with tyre wear that Perez has been having. So at Abu Dhabi, for example, they didn't pit Perez to kind of cover off the potential undercut from Leclerc. They pitted Perez to effectively because his tyres wouldn't have made it to the end, whereas Verstappen's did. And we saw this a couple of times this season where Perez's tyre management, like been considered the tyre whisperer, wasn't as good this season as it has been previously. So what has caused that? Has Perez fallen off? Has Verstappen gone to a new level on tyre management? Maybe it's possible. Is it because Verstappen's driving at the front and not really having to push that hard? Maybe that's more part of it. And even Leclerc said recently he doesn't reckon the tyre management of the Ferrari was so much of an issue. It was more the fact that they had to push so hard because they didn't have the pace that was causing their tyre management problems. Maybe that's the same for Perez, I don't know. Or maybe the car just isn't really set up so well for Perez and has favoured Max, such that his tyre management that he's been so highly praised for has now fallen behind even Verstappen, and potentially by quite a significant margin. So yeah, I just wonder what this means going forwards, because even Helmut Marko said, yeah, the cars are the same, Perez is just slow. Like, basically that's what they say. So, I mean, look, we all know it's difficult to be Verstappen's teammates, and it's been proven to be the case historically as well. And look, Red Bull don't, you know, go out of their way necessarily to help their second driver, as it were, and we've seen that on a few examples this season. So I just wonder if it's the beginning of the end of Perez's time in the Red Bull, just based on some of the words and discussions we've seen here over the last few weeks. And if it is, what does that mean for this season? Because still, the Red Bull might be the best car, but if it's marginal and Max is marginally the best driver, then from a strategy perspective, it opens so many doors to the other teams. If Perez is still 3-4 tenths off the pace, and maybe part of that is a Red Bull, you know, setup decision with their car. But yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. The other just outside potential to talk about is, what if any other cars are actually any good next season? Esteban Ocon says he's used next year's Alpine in the simulator, and it's very promising. So look, we'll see about that. The drivers aren't going to say, oh yeah, it's absolutely terrible in the simulator, this car's an absolute tractor, I'll see you guys in 2024. But yeah, Ocon reckons they might even take another step forward next year, Alpine. And also just this for the long term, some first images emerging of Aston Martin's new $200 million F1 factory being built in Northamptonshire. So I mean, yeah, they are not messing around. And this is one of the reasons I think that Alonso will be looking at this and thinking, you know what, it's not finished yet, but you know, he's well on his way. If Alonso stays there for like 3-4 years, who knows how long he's going to compete for. This might factor in to a potential race-winning car down the line. Probably not this season though. Just a couple of quick things to mention before we close out the video, because the current grid penalty system for engine penalties or just parts in general has really, well, been called into question. We've seen that many drivers, for example, taking penalties at Spa because they know they can overtake at Spa, so why not just take the penalties there? And it means that qualifying happens because the grid is then messed up and quite exciting. But, you know, let's say Verstappen starts 14th and you're in 12th position on a car that's not going to be able to compete with Max Verstappen. You're not really going to defend too hard. You're going to let him through to not cost your own race. And it doesn't often really, especially with the new cars, affect the progress and the performance of the car through the field as much as it has in the past. So, you know, some alternatives to this, some interesting ideas here, because they want to keep the limit on the amount of engines you can use in other parts as well, but maybe the current way they do it isn't great. One example here is, what about, instead of doing a grid position penalty, you do an in-race penalty? Whenever you do your first pit stop, you have to take a 20-second penalty. I don't know. Well, that's quite significant, but you know, that might actually serve as a serious, I mean, that'd be very interesting to watch, wouldn't it, right? Like, Verstappen leads, but he knows that when he takes his first pit stop, he's got to take a big time penalty because of the new engine. Like, you know, I think that'd be rather interesting. Some other ideas and potential solutions as well, but yeah, I do wonder what they'll do going forwards, because over the coming months, they will make their decisions as to what they're going to change going into the new season, if anything at all. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.